It was the 2nd of February in 2023. It started out like a routine working day. I was working from home, engineering something, your average Thursday morning, until I got interrupted by a Slack message from one of our PMs, and it said this: "Hey Raphi, we need an incident manager. Please don't disclose this yet. It's a huge disaster." And I knew the PM was usually not known for drama, so I was like, okay, this sounds interesting. And I clicked on the link, and it led me to this email from one of our vendors with an important company update. And it said that they let go of most of their personnel. They have essentially no one left. And our account manager at the vendor summed it up as, this is a bad situation and we should be treating it as a disaster level scenario. And we obviously appreciated the honesty, but it's not what you want to hear from your vendor. Now, for me, it was clear we had quite a problem on our hands, and you probably can't know that yet because in all likelihood, you have no clue who Open Systems even is. So let's quickly talk about that. What's our context at Open Systems? The company was founded in 1990 in Switzerland, a long time ago. We're today around 250 employees. We run a bit over 10,000 edge platforms. That's from cloud workloads to VMs to like physical hardware boxes like you see up there. And we run those in over 180 countries, so pretty much all around the world. Now, what do we do with that? We basically, for our customers, we connect all their users, so from a branch office to the headquarter, remote users, data center, factories, everything together. So think firewalling, routing, encryption, VPN tunnels, but also spam filtering and web proxies. We do that as a managed service, so we run that ourselves for our customers, and we do that from what we call mission control. That's the operation center in Zurich. What's noteworthy here, it's not a dedicated organization, but it's us engineers contributing roughly 1 day a week to operations. So all engineers in the company do that, and because working during the night in Zurich is not that much fun, we also do that from Honolulu, Hawaii, so we get to go there every now and then. Okay, back to our problem at hand. I hopped on a quick call with the PM who notified me, got all the information. And then I sat there at home, and that's when it hit me, and the adrenaline started to kick in. It's like, okay, nice. I got myself the incident commander or crisis lead role. Very good, very smart. And it wasn't that routine Thursday morning anymore. So what do you do then? Well, my instincts usually tell me to run, either run away and hide or run with the first idea that comes to my mind. And both of these things are not the smartest things to do. So I sat there, I had 1,000 things in my head, and the most important thing was like, okay, it's very chaotic now, so I need to get out of that chaos phase, or try to help the company get out of that chaos phase. So how do you do that? Well, it starts with yourself. First, I ate something because I knew the next hours are going to be hectic, and I don't want kind of the lower layers of the Maslow pyramid interrupt me. Then I moved to the office because I thought like talking face-to-face with people is easier than over video conferencing. And the third thing, I made sure I had my notebook, my power adapter, and a charger for the notebook and everything with me. So with myself set up, I set up the whole collaboration things, meaning a command post, aka a meeting room, Slack channels, or one single Slack channel to communicate, and some documentation structure where people could put their information. With that set up, I did what a good manager does. I set up a meeting or some kickoff thing. Now that's where I more or less invited everyone to start with a somewhat coordinated response. Now, obviously, we can't just go into that meeting unprepared, so I had to come up with a first idea. What do I want to do as kind of the crisis leader? What's my basic plan, at least for the first moments of the crisis? So I sat there and quickly did a layout of what was going on. I knew, okay, the vendor is out of business. It's used in our Web Proxy service. It's more or less inline, so if it goes down, we really have a problem. Right now, it was still working. It's Thursday, so it's soon the weekend, etc., etc. And I concluded that I have 3 problems or sub-problems that I wanted to address. first sustain operations, start communicating or communicate both internally and externally, and then have a new solution or start integrating a new solution. Now, the OCD people have noticed that. It's on purpose. What that means basically is I want to do those things in parallel as first priority, and then only later tackle the new solution. And with that first basic idea of response, we moved into action to that first meeting, that first, we call it SITREP or situation report, where there was like the CEO, PM, CEO, so pretty much anyone I could get a hold of, I got them into that meeting room. The PM who called me initially did a quick summary of what has happened so far. I basically presented my 3 things I wanted to address. We defined who will take care of each of these sub-problems initially. And then it was time for action. And within the first few hours, we had a somewhat coordinated response set up. And now people were working, and that gave me a bit of time to think about how do I actually want to solve that problem? What's my high-level plan? And I started drawing, and that's the drawing that I did somewhere in the first 6 hours, and it shows what my commander's intent, it's what it's called in the military, what's my high-level plan to address the situation. And that's a very good communication tool because everyone more or less understands it if you can read it. There's on the horizontal axis is time in somewhat logarithmic scale. On the vertical axis, we have effort or quality. And it basically says in the first days, weeks, months, we want to make sure we can sustain operations. After some months, we have a new solution ready. And in parallel, we communicate first frequently but short updates, and as we go on, longer but less frequent updates. That was my main tool to communicate from CEO to engineer what the basic plan was. It also made sure I didn't micromanage people because that's sort of all I told people, like, okay, one person does the red stuff, sustain operation, one person is responsible for the new solution, and someone for communication. So for me as crisis lead, that's more or less all I did. For the blue stuff, for communication, we decided, I think in the second SITREP, that we wanted to communicate fast and transparently, and to the point we didn't want to sugarcoat the situation or kind of hide it from our customers. So internally, we used one single Slack channel to communicate, to fan out information to the organization and get feedback or questions. Externally, we did 3 things. We used our web portal to fan out the information of the situation to all our users. Secondly, we wrote a classic email to the most important customer contacts. And thirdly, we figured we kind of seize the initiative, and we called our most important customers personally. So our technical account management people took the phone and they personally informed our customers of what was going on. That was within the first 24 hours, and we didn't really have a plan for what we were going to do yet. We basically just told them, hey, it's not the best situation, this is the plan. Or this is, well, the situation. Now, I talked a lot about how we set up our response, but we haven't actually tackled the problem yet. So let's hear it from Chris about what we did on the technical front.
So, as an engineer in the web security team, the first step for us was to bring everybody on the same page so that everybody understood what are the affected technical components. The secure web gateway at Open Systems secures corporate web traffic. So in its core, it's an HTTP forward proxy that secures the requests, the web traffic that go from our customers to the internet. Via OPSIT, our policy and security intelligence daemon, we can plug in various feeds into the secure web gateway that analyze the traffic for threats or classify the traffic as part of the URL filter. And the URL filter is this component, this service that is provided by the vendor that is out of business. So let's have a closer look at it. It consists of two main components shown in yellow or orange. a locally deployed proprietary daemon, and some vendor endpoints in the cloud somewhere. When the live web traffic passes through, the URL filter in a first step assigns a category to the request, to the URL. This can be, for instance, finance, personal storage, or news. The daemon, the locally deployed proprietary daemon, does so by doing a lookup to a local cache, and if there is a cache miss, it would do a lookup to the cloud endpoints. In a second step, the URL filter, based on this category, applies a corporate policy that says whether the traffic should be allowed or not. With that, customers can allow their employees, for instance, to serve to news websites, but not to personal storage websites, as an example. This is how the system basically works that is affected. Now, in a next step, we wanted to look at it more closely. What could now possibly go wrong? So what actually are the problems that we are facing? As Raphi was saying, the systems of the vendor were still running. So we had a closer look at the failure modes. So we tried to identify the different failure modes. We identified 2 of them. First, quality degradation of the URL filter. We were in touch with the CTO of the vendor, and he had confirmed us that the systems in their cloud are now unmaintained. There is nobody left to look after them. They were still running and providing service as of now, but they were unmaintained. We didn't know exactly how autonomous the systems are. And as you might know, every day a lot of new websites are published and created in the internet. And this was a URL filter. So we asked ourselves, so what will happen with new websites? What will happen with web traffic tomorrow, in a week? And we had to assume that more and more traffic will be unknown, so the URL filter would not be able to classify it, or that more and more traffic will get a wrong classification. So this failure mode we would be able to identify by means of looking at our telemetry that the secure web gateway exposes. So if there is an increase in the unknown rate, we would know this is happening. Another thing that could happen, or we expect it to happen, is that we get more and more support requests in operations as part of mission control about traffic that is wrongly classified, so complaints of end users or customers. The second failure mode is that the vendor endpoints, so the systems in the cloud, go offline completely. As already said, for now the systems were still running. So how should we find out what would happen in this case? We simulated it by applying some local firewall rules on one of our secure web gateways to find out. And what we found out is that the proprietary daemon could sustain a certain level of operation for some time, because there was this cache. But eventually, all the categorization requests would time out. The URL filter as a whole is designed in a fail-open mode. That's a design choice by us. So if more and more requests are timing out, that means that we will end up in an allow-all situation for all our customers' web traffic, because the corporate policy cannot be applied anymore. Maybe just a hint why this is a problem. I guess most of you will already know a bit. So this could lead to significant challenges for our customers and therefore also for us because they pay us. The URL filter helps them to enforce compliance and security standards for the web browsing of their employees. In certain cases, it's even important to be compliant with local regulations. Another funny thing that we learned when doing this experiment with the firewall rule is, it's actually not so funny, at least it was not back then, it was quite terrifying. When we restarted this proprietary daemon, while the vendor endpoints are offline, then it would not become operational anymore. Because the first thing it does is to try to validate its license towards the cloud endpoints. Classic, right? So now we had understood the two failure modes and how to identify them. It was time to move on the communications front internally. So we started to set up a runbook that would help and guide our fellow engineers in mission control in case the situation goes south and the vendor endpoints, the systems in the cloud, go offline. Oof. This was a very intense first day. We had set up the coordinated crisis response. We did a technical assessment and we did some communication. Now let's have a look at how we continued throughout the first week. This is the system at hand. A URL filter, that vendor that is out of business and whose systems are running on autopilot. Our PM and some other engineers in my team directly started with the vendor replacement process. So to come up with a new URL filter vendor. But it would take time and we didn't want to wait for that. So what shall we do? We started to build our own URL filter. A local URL filter feed that we can plug in into UPSID, you remember, the policy and intelligence security daemon, and that would take up the work in case the vendor endpoints go offline and until we have a permanent replacement ready. How did you do that? Remember the two steps of URL filtering. First, assign a category based on the URL, and second, apply a corporate policy that says whether this traffic should be allowed or blocked. In case the vendor endpoints go offline completely, we would end up in an allow all situation. What can we learn from that? It means that for all the traffic that anyways is allowed by corporate policy, it doesn't make a difference whether the URL filter actually works or not. So we could simplify our problem to just be able to continue to identify all the traffic that needs to be blocked. So be able to block the traffic that was blocked also before everything worked normally. The secure web gateway emits telemetry, and part of this telemetry is the URL, the category, as well as the action. Was it denied or was it allowed? An existing data processing pipeline was used to compile an index of the top blocked domains globally, and this index we shipped to all our secure web gateway deployments of our customers. Then we implemented the service, the feed, the UPSID feed that would start to use this index for URL filtering. After 1 week, so 1 week into the crisis, we had our first version of the local URL filter feed ready and deployed with a index of the top 100,000 blocked domains and categories. It was ready to take up the work in case the vendor endpoints go offline.
With the progress on the technical front, we obviously also moved again on the communication front. Internally, we continue to use our Slack channel, obviously, and in addition to that, I, as the crisis lead, had, I think, 2 meetings with our executive teams to brief them about our response. That's very handy because on one hand, you get to tell them what you're trying to do, so they know someone is doing something, so they ideally don't interfere. But you also get feedback on your response because they usually have more experience, so you get a couple of good questions to make sure the response gets better. Another thing we did internally was to start an FAQ, so our customer-facing employees could just use the FAQ to answer customer questions they got from the customer, and they didn't need to disturb the people working on more actively on the crisis. Externally, we continue to use our web portal to fan out information to all the customers and also send one last email to the most important customer contacts. The first week was all about getting into the rhythm. I continued to use my commander's intent to tell everyone what the plan was, and we did the sit reps as already introduced. So we did a sit rep, and then we executed, and we basically followed that cycle. Initially, we had a sit rep every 6 hours, then every day, then every other day. What did we do in such a sit rep? It was very simple. Each one of the kind of 3 leads of the 3 sub-problems, so sustain operations, new solution, communications, they would just say what they did in the last execution phase, so everyone knew what has happened. Then every one of them told us what they intend to do in the next phase, and obviously that's when you realize that things don't align. So you align and you decide how you're going to proceed, and then you go to the next execution phase, and that's basically how we rolled. The first week, everything seemed very, very well under control. We were into our rhythm. We had a first solution at hand, first mitigation solution built. Until by the end of the first week, the vendor endpoints went offline. Obviously during the night in Zurich, but luckily they recovered after 15 minutes and we didn't need to activate our contingency plans. Nevertheless, it was a very good reminder that the situation was anything but stable and that it was a very good idea to continue with our plan and integrate a new solution. As the weeks went on and we moved into the months, the response got quite boring. And believe me, a boring crisis is a good crisis. We were happy with the local feed that we built, so sustain operation. We said, okay, that's good enough. We don't want to spend more engineering resources on that. And we moved into a weekly cycle of sit rep and execute plan because work took time. There was no point in having a meeting to say that we didn't progress yet. So the main focus was on building the new solution, and Christof has the details there.
So we needed to replace this URL filter product. Open Systems had already gone through such a replacement 10 years earlier. So we knew that it will take time and it will be painful. We evaluated 3 vendors within the first month and started with the integration of our preferred product right after. Once we had seen the preferred product of the new vendor in action on some of our productive secure web gateways, we signed the contract with the vendor, and this was 3 months into the crisis. After 4 months, the first customer was migrated. The secure web gateways of Open Systems are deployed in 180 countries. So we need to make sure that our services can also be operational in regions with very heterogeneous connectivity environments. This caused quite some headache in our team and also in the mission control operations organization, especially in this early phase of the migration. Once my team had migrated the first customer, we gave it to the technical account managers to continue, and they started to migrate customer one by one. Now, you might ask, why did you migrate customers one by one and not just flip the switch for all of them? So the old URL filter system, so the one that we wanted to get rid of, had been fine-tuned for each customer and their corporate policy over the last 10 years. And the new vendor, they could not guarantee us to classify the traffic, the web traffic, exactly the same. Also, they could not give us exactly the same list of categories. So those are factors that could potentially lead to quite some problems in operation, and that's why we decided for a more conservative approach. Finally, the last customer was migrated 7 months into the crisis. The crisis was over. And fun fact, the vendor endpoints in the cloud of the old vendor, they were still reachable and providing service. So, looking back, a proprietary daemon in the hot path of the web traffic of our customers with this weird license validation mechanism that would lead to failure in case the vendor endpoints are not reachable anymore. It sounds bad. And from scratch, we would certainly have designed this system differently. But it's also a fact that when you're evaluating and selecting a URL filter vendor, it's not quite like selecting a public cloud or a front-end framework or a programming language. The options are limited. The crisis pushed every one of us out of their comfort zone. So it was good that there were some tools and technologies and also processes that we could rely on that were familiar, where we were all on the same page, especially also in our engineering team. And such a thing was UPSID, our Unified Policy and Security Intelligence daemon. It gave us this abstraction between the core web proxy and the various intelligence feeds, and it facilitated so much the integration and the implementation of our contingency plan, the local URL filter feed, but then later also the actual replacement of the URL filter. Having telemetry available for all our secure web gateway deployments in a central place and an existing data processing pipeline and engineers that actually know how to operate it was key to take data-driven decisions. And in the end, this bought us time. It gave us confidence for the long-lasting and tedious vendor replacement process. Our config and runtime platform can roll out hotfixes within 24 hours to all our secure web gateway deployments. Now, you might say, okay, that doesn't sound super fast. Consider that open systems deployments, they don't only run in hyperscaler clouds, but also on manufacturing plants and in areas with poor connectivity. Finally, for the vendor replacement itself, we had a short list of 3 alternative vendors ready in the shelf on the day the crisis began. So our product manager had them literally ready in his shelf and could take them out. Why that? 2 years previously, this vendor, the vendor that is out of business, tried to increase the price significantly. That led us into looking into alternatives back then. Now, looking back, looking at it retrospectively, it's pretty clear that that might be one of the first signs of their decline. And our first instinct to look into alternatives was certainly the right thing to do. If such a crisis like this happens, it's good to know about alternatives. Raphi, what do we take away from a crisis lead perspective?
Of course, not everything was perfect. Some things were good, some things were bad. Where we weren't really good was crisis preparedness. Yes, we had some documents with a convoluted process about crisis response, but we didn't actually exercise our crisis response muscle. We didn't really train for crisis. That wasn't good. On the communication fronts, our rules to communicate fast and transparently, that was good, but actually doing it was a different story. For example, having we had all email addresses of our customer contacts, all of them, but who exactly to inform at each customer for this specific crisis, to filter that and then somewhat efficiently contact them, it was a lot of manual work, and that's why we also, after the first week, abandoned to do that, because it was just too much effort. In terms of communication, I think we also sometimes set traps for ourselves, that we said in some communication statement, well, the next update follows within 1 hour, and after 1 hour we didn't really have something new to communicate. And it's like, okay, what do we do now? Do we just not communicate, but that kind of eradicates trust? Or do you just communicate a null update, which is what we did, because we figure, okay, well, bad luck. So we just say that we don't have anything to communicate yet. So maybe give yourself a bit more time, and under promise, over deliver is probably a good idea there. Some things, or the majority of things, went relatively well. And one thing is, well, a general mantra to hope for the best but plan for the worst. The vendor endpoints, they were reachable most of the times, but we hoped they would remain like that, but we didn't really know. There were rumors that the old employees of the vendor would try to do some buyout. They contacted us on LinkedIn and things like that, but that's not something we could count on. So we decided to, well, go with what we can control and move on with the replacement. You saw the crisis response process of have a sit rep and then execute, and that's super simple. And also the commander's intent that I used to kind of guide or try to lead the organization through the crisis, that was very simple. I think that paid off really well, because it was super easy to onboard new people, and it wasn't overly convoluted, and just everyone could understand it, from CEO or management to engineers. And last but certainly not least is to trust your people. That means ideally know who works in your organization, know what they do, know what skills they have, what knowledge they have, so the day the crisis comes, you already know them, and you can team up to face whatever you face. So what do we take away? First thing, ideally, just don't have a crisis. Your life is much less stressed if you don't have that one, and if you don't have it, you can focus what your company actually set out to do, and you don't get interrupted by this. But if you do face a crisis, the first thing, step up, take charge, team up, ideally with the people you already know and trust, make a good plan, not a perfect plan, just a good workable plan, make sure it's more or less simple, and then, and most importantly, lead. Thank you very much.